Hello! Today we'll be learning about properties, which are arguably the most important part of any program. Properties are used to represent things to a computer. These representations are called abstractions. For instance, we might abstract a book as the text of its title. We could abstract the weather as a number representing a temperature, and we could abstract your grades in this course as a decimal number. Of course, there are always other ways of abstracting something. For instance, a book could also be represented by its price, or your grade as a letter. It is up to the programmer to decide what abstraction works best for their situation. On the right-hand side, you see code that demonstrates one way we can declare properties in Python. Once we have our properties, we can write instructions to manipulate them. That's what computers are very good at, quickly manipulating properties over and over again. Programmers write code that tells the computer how to change properties. In this series of videos, we'll be looking at understanding properties before we start trying to write them. Properties have 5 different parts. Some parts of a property change over time, but some will always be the same. Some parts are for the benefit of the programmer, and some are understood by the computer. When someone asks you, "Tell me about the property," there are 5 different things you can tell them about. First, we'll talk about the name of a property. Every property has a name that uniquely identifies it. This name should be descriptive and informative. Although 2 people can have the same name, 2 different properties should never have the same name, or Python will think you're trying to change the value of that property. In the code shown here, the top 3 properties are very clear and descriptive: temperature, description, wind _ speed. In the bottom code, 2 of the properties have the same name, weather and weather, and one of the properties is totally vague, something. Making a good property name is an art, and it is only with practice and feedback over time that you really get good at naming properties. In fact, 2 skilled programmers may think of very different names for the same property. However, there are some rules. Names are a combination of numbers, letters, and underscores, but they cannot start with numbers. Properties can never have spaces or dashes. Instead, underscores are used to break up words. One of the biggest mistakes that beginners make is to confuse properties for string values with single or double quotes. Do not confuse a string value for a property. There are also some words that you can't use because Python uses them for other things. These words are reserved. These words will show up in a different color if you try to use them. Knowing how properties are named are the first step in identifying all the properties in a block of code. There can be a lot of properties. It is crucial to ignore string values and reserved words as you start trying to identify properties. Next, we'll talk about where properties originate from in code. There are 2 possible origins for new properties. First is through assignment. This is the most common origin. The line of code shown creates a new property named temperature. That property can be used anytime after this line. The other origin is through iteration. These 2 lines create a new property named book. You can use this property inside the body of the for loop. There are actually other ways to create new properties, but these are the 2 most common ways. Remember, if you see a property, it probably came from either iteration or assignment. Now we'll be talking about the purpose of a given property. Computers are stupid, and they have no real understanding of the name of a property. They understand that a property has a name and that it uniquely identifies it, but they have no deeper understanding than that. They can't tell if a value for the property makes sense, just that it has a name. Humans, however, are very smart. We look at a property and understand it much more deeply. This is why it is polite to choose good property names. It is for the benefit of other humans who have to read your code. This includes yourself. If you are representing the current temperature as a number, temperature is a good name, but weather is not as good since it is less specific. Data is a very bad name since it is very vague. When you're reading code, you should treat it as a scientific exploration. You look at a property name and develop a hypothesis about its purpose. You may find out later that you are wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. You simply have to dive back in until you know for sure.